Okay, so this is a GUNNAR 1001. I've got it partially disassembled. The air prep system usually mounts right here. I've got it off the machine. I've got it sitting up here so I can work on it. Just showing you the machine before I get too far into this and I rewire it. That's the plan. New wire, new tubing, and get it all back in good shape. Probably put some new belts on it too. Okay. Oh, let's look underneath at the clamps. And the valves. Okay. So this is an older GUNNAR, and it connects to the control tower with 3 individual cables. All right. This one's for the cutting head here. This one, if I guess right, this one is the Y motor. And this one is the X motor. So X, Y, Z. That parallel cable is for all of the I/O, running the valves, listening for the stop switch or the cut switch to be pushed. So that's what's in the limit switch and home switches are in that parallel connection. All right. This is a GUNNAR 1001. The computer tower is here. Computers up here. Monitor, keyboard, mouse. I'm using this computer over here with a PCI card. This is the original computer with an ISA card. I've rewired this machine, put all new hoses on it, upgraded the cutting head, so it's shortly it'll get new clamp cylinders, but I wanted to show you this all working. So let's just look at this. So I've got my regulators for my cutting head, my blade head cylinder, and the clamps, start button, emergency stop or stop button. All right, this cutting head has an upgrade kit on it. I've removed the Italian air cylinders, which aren't made anymore, and replaced them with SMC cylinders. This has got a special block here and a custom threaded rod to fit. I've totally rewired this machine. I've removed all of the Molex connectors that use special tooling to work on them, and replace them with the green Phoenix connectors here and here. Okay, so this works just like the machine in previous videos. Let's look some more at what I've done rewiring. Again, because you can't buy limit switches with 5-meter leads, I have put a connector here for standard switches with 1-meter leads. This connector, I've got the power for the 2 limit switches combined. I've got the 0 volts, which is the blue wire. I've got that combined for the 2 switches, and then each switch has its own signal wire. And so red is positive for everything, for both switches. Black is negative, and then the signal lines are white and green. All right. Also, this switch here, I put a connector underneath the table there and run the wire on the outside rather than on the inside of the tube with the belt. See, these wires are run inside the tube with the belt. That's just the way they make them. Looks like I got some dirt in there. Get that out. All right. Now I've wired this a little differently. Let's start down here at the base of the tower. All right, so this, in a previous video, you saw where there's a big metal plug here. The motors on the machine are connected through this big cable. Some GUNNARs don't have this big connector. They have 3 separate cables going through grommets. This happened to be a first generation 1001, so the individual motor cables went through these grommets, and this was here. I've taken that off and I've run the cables just through the hole. X and Y back here, and Z up here. And then the special power supply. This power supply has been replaced because the original one is bad. I've run the cables here. Now what I've done is the parallel cable used to go through this opening down here for the inputs and outputs. On a previous video you'll see where I had a special silver Phoenix parallel cable connector with screw terminals. I have completely rewired this machine, and rather than using a solder type 25 pin D-sub, I used a screw type. The problem is that, you know, all the jackets of all the cables can't fit in that connector. The individual conductors can, but not the jackets of the cables. That works, but I decided to do an alternate on this, and I'll show you that in a little bit. So let's go underneath the table. So, well, let's start back here. So I've got the parallel cable right here with the inputs and outputs, and I've got the motor cable right here. So the motor cable runs into the tower, and this parallel cable stays outside now and doesn't go in, and it runs in there with all the other cables and comes up under here, and it connects to this nice little DIN rail mounted connector that gives me the ability to screw in all my inputs and outputs, limit switches, start button, all of that. So I mounted that piece of DIN rail to the cover and ran the parallel cable up here. I like this. It's easier to work on. And this machine, the main air comes in here, and that tube right there brings the air up to this distribution block right here, where I've got individually colored circuits like in the previous video that run down to the regulators at the front of the machine and then back to the individual valves. These are the 3 valves. This K valve is for the cutting head, the M valve is for the blade, and the A valve is for the clamps. I have color coded all the circuits with different color wire or tubing so that it's easy to follow from a diagnostics standpoint. Originally it was not like that. Also, in the front of the machine here, normally this would be sitting back like this, but I have it tilted open. There's a regulator for each function: head, blade, clamp, a gauge for each regulator, a start button, and a stop button, and it acts as an emergency stop too. And this knob down here is for changing the clamping configuration, which I'll explain later. It's called COE mode. So behind here is where all the connections are, and you can see each colored circuit going to a regulator, cutting head, blade, and clamps. There's also connectors for the wiring for the buttons. And then this mess of tubing down here is the back side of the COE button. All those cables or hoses go through the aluminum frame. And down here to the cutting circuits, to the clamp circuits. Okay. Let's go around underneath the table. I've also replumbed all of the air cylinders with the green and yellow cables. These cylinders in here are very difficult to get to. You have to dismount the cutting table from the frame in order to get to those air cylinders. This one here and that one back there. All right, so I've got the GUNNAR software here. Okay, the refresh bar is gonna keep going because the camera is faster than the monitor is. So we're gonna see this flow by at regular intervals. I've got under services, check machine, and I can operate the machine. For example, I can push the clamp button and all the clamps will go down. This one also has the COE button, so I can turn that, and now these 4 clamps over here are down and these 4 are up, and when I press the clamp button they alternate. Okay. So now this button does the cutting head right here. This button. So if I look over there, okay. So the blade head, and you'll see this guy go in and out. Okay. See how that goes in slow like that? That's because I've got the throttle valve off. If I turn the throttle valve on and then I click the blade button, it goes fast. The throttle valve is the valve there with the red light on it. So when that red light is on, the blade head goes fast. That's for normal cutting. If I'm cutting an oval or a circle, then the throttle valve gets turned off and then the blade goes in slow. So as it's going around the oval, it descends into the mat board at a slower pace. So you can't detect the start and stop positions. All right, and then down here in the bottom section, I have motor controls. I can move the motors, the Y motor. can move the X motor over here on this button right here. X motor right here. By U, or the cutting head motor. Okay. Now I can initialize the machine under services menu. There's new initialization. If I click that, it's going to home the machine. So it first homes the cutting head. Now it's moving the Y carriage until it finds that home switch. And at the same time, it's moving the arm this way until it finds that home switch. And then it goes to the park position. If I want to cut, I click the cut button. So this is an oval, and you see the overlap at the end. That's because that's to compensate for the slow entry of the blade at the beginning. All right. So if I take this and I delete this and I add a new opening and call it good, and then I cut this. Let's do that again. Press cut. You see how it puts the foot down one time and then the blade in each time. Alright, so that shows you rewired, replumbed GUNNAR 1001. This one happens to be using a PCI controller. We can run it with an ISA controller too. I also have a USB controller for it, but I'm not a fan of the USB controller. There's some issues with timing on it, and so I wouldn't recommend that controller. So, all right. If you have any questions or interested in this machine, contact the CMC Doctor on thecmcdoctor.com. Thank you.